Everyone thought Maple Lane was the kind of neighborhood where nothing bad could happen. Perfect lawns, white fences, neighbors waving like extras in a commercial. But the truth was waiting just beneath the surface, quiet as a snake in tall grass, and I didn't see it until it was too late. The morning it all began, I stood by my pool with a skimmer in one hand and coffee in the other. Sunlight played across the water like it was proud of its own reflection. Birds sang from the maples Sarah and I planted, the kind of sound that made you believe in safe places, in beginnings. We'd only been here a few months. Sarah was already pregnant, and we thought we'd found paradise. Then the side gate clanged open. The sound didn't belong in a place like this. It sounded like a prison door slamming shut. And through it walked Karen Miller. Red visor tilted like a crown, white polo pressed within an inch of its life. Karen wasn't just a neighbor. She was the HOA president, and she insisted you remember her name. Behind her marched 6 women in matching swim caps, strutting like they'd just stepped out of a catalog. Designer workout gear clung to them like armor. Karen announced it like she was opening a Broadway show. Community Wellness Class, Neighborhood Health Initiative. Her voice had that syrupy smugness that could sour milk. I froze, coffee halfway to my lips. This is my private pool, not your community center. She waved me off like I was a child whining past bedtime. Don't be dramatic, Robert. Then one of her crew pulled out a crisp 20, handed it to Karen, and dove headfirst into my pool. The splash hit me like a slap across the face. And that's when I knew this wasn't a mistake, this was a takeover. See, I'd been preparing for this. Every violation slip, every fake inspection, every late-night knock on my door had been leading here. Sarah warned me Karen wasn't going to stop until she owned us, so I had built my insurance. A little red button hidden beneath the stone coping. A switch Sarah had labeled emergency use only. The cash, the clipboard, the arrogance, all the proof I needed. My thumb hovered over the button, my heart pounded, and then I pressed it. From hidden jets around the pool, a mist began to rise. At first, it looked harmless, almost like morning dew. But 3 heartbeats later, chemistry roared to life. The water glowed neon green, tracer dye bonding with chlorine, with sunscreen, with everything Karen touched. Screams erupted. The pool churned like a radioactive cauldron. Women scrambled for the ladder, their arms and faces glowing like alien war paint. Karen whipped around to face me, her eyes blazing with the kind of fury only found in people who'd never been told no in their lives. You ruined everything, she screamed. And then she shoved me. My heel clipped the coping and coffee slipped from my hand. Gravity took over and I plunged into the very trap I'd set. For one terrifying second, sound disappeared. Chlorine burned my eyes and my lungs begged for air. And yet, even under that glowing mess, a strange calm settled over me, because this was no longer her game. It was mine. I surfaced into chaos. Neighbors gathered, phones raised, live-streaming the HOA queen dripping in neon humiliation. Karen screamed for order, but every camera caught the truth. Her hand on the cash box, the glowing bills inside, her army of trespassers fleeing like rats. Then came the sirens. Blue and red strobes lit the maples Sarah and I had planted, painting them in colors of justice. Deputy Martinez arrived, the same one who dismissed me before. But this time there was no shrug, no excuse. My cracked phone was still recording. Dispatch had heard everything live. Karen tried to spin it, accused me of trapping them, of using chemicals. Martinez's eyes drifted from the no trespassing signs to the cash box to the override key in my hand. "Ma'am, did you pay to swim here?" he asked. Her chin lifted. "They paid me." The words hung in the air, heavy as a death sentence. She just admitted it. And yet, standing there dripping neon green, I realized something. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Because what I'd done tonight wasn't justice. It was only the beginning. 6 months earlier, Sarah and I had rolled down Maple Lane for the first time, our hearts full of hope. We saw the house, the pool so blue it made the sky jealous, and thought we'd found the American dream. We didn't know the nightmare that lived 2 doors down. But we were about to learn. 6 months earlier, Sarah and I rolled down Maple Lane with the windows open and the radio low, breathing in the kind of autumn air that makes you believe the world still has good corners left. The sun spilled gold across the trees, painting the neighborhood like a postcard. And then we saw it, our house. White fence, fresh paint, a pool so bright and blue it made the sky jealous. We parked, looked at each other, and without a word we knew. This was it. The place we'd raise our baby, the place we'd finally feel safe. That night, sprawled on a mattress in the living room surrounded by moving boxes, Sarah traced circles on my chest and whispered, "We made it." And for a brief, fragile moment, I believed her. The first week was perfect. Too perfect. Kids rode bikes in flawless formation. Neighbors waved from porches with the kind of smiles you usually see on staged billboards. Even the ice cream truck jingled by like it was rehearsed. We were intoxicated on hope, drunk on normalcy after years of scraping by. And then the first yellow slip appeared. Paint shade not on approved list. I laughed, had to be some mistake. Bureaucracy gone haywire. 2 days later another arrived, trash visible after pickup window. Then another, grass exceeds regulation 2-inch limit. Each slip signed the same way, HOA President Karen Miller. At first I treated it like a joke, fixed the trim, moved the bins, buzzed the lawn down until it looked like a military base. But the slips didn't stop, they multiplied. Sarah held one at breakfast, her hands trembling. Is this normal? I forced a smile even though it tasted bitter. Rules keep neighborhoods pretty, I told her, but deep down I knew pretty was just another word for control. Then Karen came in person. A plate of cookies so hard they could have doubled as roofing tiles, her visor gleaming like a crown. She didn't even say hello before her eyes scanned our porch, our hedge, our mailbox, filing everything away in her invisible ledger. "Welcome to Maple Lane," she chirped, though her tone made it sound like a warning. Her clipboard was already filled with pre-printed violation slips, our address typed neatly on each one, like tickets waiting for crimes we hadn't committed yet. Sarah tried to be polite, but I saw her hand tighten around the plate of cookies until her knuckles went white. That night, our phones lit up with screenshots from the HOA app. Karen's post, "Community courage, sharing resources for wellness." The comments gushed, neighbors falling over themselves with praise. A few even suggested discounts for pool owners who shared their water. And then I saw Karen's reply, a winky face, a link to a form that ended in a payment field. That's when it hit me, she wasn't asking, she was planning. 2 weeks later, it stopped being slips of paper and became something worse. I woke before dawn to the sound of water slapping. I rushed outside and froze. Strangers in swim caps slicing clean laps through my pool. And there she was, Karen, sitting smugly in a lawn chair with a cash box at her side. "Community fitness program," she announced when I demanded answers. "Robert read your covenants." I called the sheriff. Deputy Martinez showed up, took notes like he was filling out insurance forms, and shrugged. "Civil issue, sir. Work it out with your board." I stood in my own driveway, watching my water churn with strangers, while the woman 2 doors down collected cash for it. And the law had just told me I was on my own. That was the moment something broke inside me. It didn't stop there. A man in a reflective vest showed up 2 days later, flashing what looked like a badge. "City inspection. Unsafe dimensions on your pool. Immediate stop-use order." "Unsafe dimensions?" I asked, staring at the water. "Height variance," he said, pointing like he'd rehearsed the lie. I called the city, put it on speaker. "We don't conduct surprise pool inspections," the clerk said flatly, "and height variance isn't a thing." The so-called inspector backed away, muttering about miscommunication. But not before a yellow slip fell from his clipboard, Karen's letterhead, her handwriting. That night Sarah asked the question that still echoes in my head. What kind of neighborhood did we move into? I didn't answer. I just went to the garage and pulled out PVC wiring steel. I wasn't going to let her win. If she wanted war fought with paper and lies, she was about to meet someone who fought with something sharper. The next weeks were a blur of late nights and cold coffee. I installed cameras in the hedges, sensors on every window and door, smart locks that only opened with my fingerprint, and then the masterpiece, 12 tons of steel sliding into place as a new front gate. The sound it made when it closed was final, like a bank vault sealing shut. And yet, even with my fortress built, the war didn't stop. Doug, the so-called HOA security, showed up at my gate one night, trying keys, jamming the latch with a toothpick, a cigarette dangling from his mouth like he owned the place. The sprinkler system kicked on, soaking him head to toe. He cursed and left behind another fake inspection tag, this one zip-tied to my gate. Safety inspection failed. I filed it under Exhibit A, Safety Theater. Sarah tried to keep things light. At least they notice your craftsmanship, she joked, but her smile broke when she realized what I had. Nobody waved at us anymore. Neighbors crossed the street rather than look at me. It was Karen they feared, it was me. And then came the first real threat. Doug stood at my gate, eyes hungry, his HOA patch crooked on his shirt. Karen wants the sprinkler plans, he said. I stayed silent. You're 2 inches over height code, he added, tapping my gate. We can make that disappear or we can make you tear it down. The rage that surged inside me was violent, almost uncontrollable. My fists tightened. For a moment I saw myself drag him across the lawn, but then another memory hit, a mistake I'd made years ago overseas. Rage that had turned respect into ruin. I swore to Sarah I'd never let anger steer me again. So I stepped back. And that's when I noticed old Mr. Abernathy across the street, watering his petunias. He gave the smallest shake of his head, a warning. Later he shuffled over, hose in hand. His voice was gravel. County solicitor, 22 years, my hobby, slapping bullies with paper. He handed me a Ziploc bag with a chain of custody form already filled with my name. Document everything. Paper kills panic. Records win. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't alone. The next time Karen came, she didn't bring her clipboard. She brought a manila envelope. She slid it across my porch table like it was a peace offering. Inside, waiver forms, a pre-signed access agreement, even a spa gift card Sarah would have loved under any other circumstance. You donate 2 afternoons a week for community wellness hours, Robert. I'll make those little variances vanish. Everybody wins. Her perfume smelled like poison wrapped in sugar. I leaned back, everybody. She tilted closer, smile sharpening. It'd be a shame if your unsafe gate complicated your insurance, especially with a baby on the way. Liability is such an ugly word. The blood drained from my face, not because I was scared, because she had said baby, and she knew. I held up my phone, red light blinking. Ugly words look great on video. Her smile snapped. You're making enemies you can't afford. Good, I told her. Volume discount. That night I stepped onto our driveway barefoot. A neat row of thumbtacks glittered across the concrete like a grin with too many teeth, and waiting on the porch, a sympathy card. We all want what's best for the community. No signature. I swept the tacks into a jar, dropped the card in, labeled it Exhibit B, Friendship. Abernathy told me to keep the chain of custody. Joey wanted to mail it back with confetti. We compromised, confetti, but make it felony. Sarah stood at the window, hand on her stomach. Are we safe? She whispered. Not yet, I admitted, but we will be. That was the night our dining table became a war room. Joey slid in with a six-pack, cracking jokes to keep the fear from swallowing us. Abernathy came later, notebook full of statutes and precedents. Together we cycled through options, lawsuit, injunction, press exposure. Every path meant months of delay, and Karen laughing poolside. We need proof, Joey said. Evidence she can't spin or bury, catch the queen ant with crumbs all over her face. Sarah frowned but nodded. The plan began to take shape. Operation Citrus Highlighter. In the garage, Joey inflated a kiddie pool. Abernathy measured tracer dye like a pharmacist, his hands steady with the weight of law. Sarah flipped the switch on a UV lamp. With one splash of sunscreen, the water turned neon lime, glowing like something radioactive. Joey dipped a finger, painted his cheek with a glowing streak. Sarah grinned. Congratulations, your evidence. We tested everything. Dilution rates, fade times, safety drills. Sarah made us rehearse evacuation twice, masks on, gate open. No one would ever get trapped. We logged it all in a binder labeled Exhibit C. I filed a note with the non-emergency line. Possible trespass, brightly colored water, no medical risk. If the day went sideways, the record would prove we chose bright, not brutal. We need patience, I told them. She'll make another move, she can't help herself, and when she does, we'll be ready. That night after Sarah went to bed, Joey sent out his RC truck, tiny camera taped to the hood. We followed the feed through the alley until it landed near the rec center, where Karen held court under an SUV's headlights. Her voice carried sharp as a whip. If Maple Lane won't cooperate, we create compliance. Someone asked her to define create. Her smile was the kind of smile dentists warn you about. Noise complaints, trash citations, paper trails designed to strangle families into selling. The audio was fuzzy, but the faces were gold. Joey parked the RC by a storm drain and blinked its headlights in Morse code, probably spelled out yikes. We retrieved it 10 minutes later. Doug was already prowling the shadows, suspicious as a raccoon with a GED. By morning, I knew two things. 1, Karen wasn't just petty, she was dangerous. 2, restraint was the only weapon she didn't expect me to use. But then came the surveillance. A mail truck idled at the corner, same driver 3 times that week. Sunglasses on a cloudy day, clipboard in his lap, never once delivering to us. Sarah noticed first, sipping her coffee like a soldier behind glass. "He's not postal," she whispered. I followed the truck, 3 cars back. Watched him peel off a magnetic USPS logo and replace it with a landscaping company sign. Saw the roll of yellow violation slips in his glove box. Click, click, evidence. The circle tightened. We weren't just fighting fines anymore. This was surveillance. Coordination, something larger than one arrogant woman with a visor. That afternoon I went to Ron, treasurer of the HOA. His shirt wrinkled, his eyes twitching like he hadn't slept in weeks. "Rob," he whispered, glancing over his shoulder, "we shouldn't be talking." "Ron, whatever she has on you, it's not worth this. Look at yourself." He laughed bitterly. "You think this is about me? You have no idea what you're up against." I put my boot in his doorframe. "Then tell me." 10 minutes later, his kitchen table was covered in papers. Bank statements, legal docs, emails printed and highlighted. "She's been embezzling for years," Ron said, sliding records across the table. "Skimming maintenance, inflating contractor bills, inventing expenses. 14 properties bought under shell companies after she depresses values with fines and harassment." I froze. She's not just stealing from the HOA, she's stealing the neighborhood. Ron nodded. "Remember the Fosters? They refused to sell, house burned. 2 weeks later, one of her LLCs bought the lot." Cold shot through me. This wasn't neighborhood politics gone bad. This was organized crime with an HOA letterhead. Ron's hands trembled as he pushed a small digital recorder across the table. 3 months of her voice. "If something happens to me, get this to someone who can't be bought." My throat was dry. "Nothing's going to happen to you, Ron." But he just shook his head. "I'm already dead, just haven't stopped breathing yet." When I left his house, I could feel the eyes. The mail truck again, parked down the block. A landscaping crew trimming hedges where no hedges needed trimming. It was surveillance, a net, and Sarah and I were the fish. That night she came home glowing from her doctor's appointment, news about the baby on her lips. But when she saw my face, the glow faded. I told her everything, about Ron, about the shell companies, about the Fosters' fire. She went pale, but her voice hardened. "So what do we do?" I looked out at our perfect street, at the dream we'd bought that was rotting from the inside out. We burned down her whole operation. Sarah placed her hand over her belly, steady, certain. "For the baby, for everyone she's hurt, for the ones she's planning to hurt." And just like that, the war changed. It wasn't about pool slips anymore, it was survival. The night after Ron handed me that recorder, Sarah and I sat at our kitchen table staring at it like it was a loaded gun. 3 months of Karen's voice, threats, bribes, embezzlement laid bare. We had enough to burn her world down. The only question was whether we were willing to light the match. Sarah broke the silence first. We could just leave, take this to the FBI, disappear, let them handle it while we start over somewhere safe. Her voice trembled, but her eyes didn't. She wasn't scared for herself. She was scared for us, for the baby. I reached across the table and took her hand. If we run, what happens to the next family, to the next neighborhood she sets her sights on? That's not our responsibility, Rob. But wasn't it? Every sleepless night, every yellow slip, every laugh at my expense. It wasn't just about me anymore. I thought of the Foster's house going up in flames. Of Ron's daughter finding lipstick on her mirror. Your father needs to be careful. If we walked away, someone else would inherit the monster. There's a right way to do this, I whispered. And there's a smart way. They don't have to be the same thing. Sarah stared at me for a long moment, then she nodded. If we do this, we do it clean, surgical, no heroics, no unnecessary risks. That was the moment I knew. We weren't just fighting for ourselves anymore. We were fighting to end this once and for all. The next morning, the surveillance was still there. A van parked under a dead streetlight. A man pretending to read a newspaper but glancing at our house too often. Amateurs, but their presence made one thing clear. Karen knew she'd been exposed and she was tightening the net. Which meant we had to move faster. We mirrored every file onto 3 drives, one couriered to the state AG, one mailed to the FBI Public Corruption Unit, one locked in Abernathy's safe. Redundancy was survival. But evidence wasn't enough. We needed her caught in the act, her crimes undeniable, her own arrogance sealing the case. And for that, we needed bait. That evening, Sarah asked the question that cut through every plan I'd sketched in my head. What if she comes after us first? I looked at her belly, at the faint swell of life that hadn't asked for any of this, and I forced a promise past the lump in my throat. Then we stay smarter, not stronger, smarter. Abernathy liked the plan, Joey loved it. Ron was terrified but agreed. We would make Karen think she'd won, offer to sell, lure her into a private meeting. Get her talking about the development deals, the shell companies, maybe even the Foster's fire, while wearing a wire supplied by federal agents. Sarah stared at me when I told her, that's incredibly dangerous. Less dangerous than running and hopping she never finds us. She thought about it for a long while, then whispered, if we do this, I want guarantees, protection, witness relocation if we need it. And the moment I say stop, we stop. No questions, no pride. I nodded, agreed. That night, as she lay in bed with her hand resting on her stomach, I stood at the window and watched the surveillance van. They thought they had us cornered. They thought we were prey. But I knew better. We weren't trapped, we were hunting. The call came at 2:11 a.m., a blocked number. A woman's voice, sweet and sing-song. Congratulations on the baby, sleep is important. You should try it with both eyes closed. Then silence. Sarah found me already recording the call log, forwarding it to Abernathy. She didn't cry. She just placed my hand on her belly. This is why. The baby kicked, soft but certain like agreement. By dawn, the plan was set in motion. The following night, the rec center buzzed like a hornet's nest. Folding chairs scraped against the floor as neighbors filed in, their whispers heavy with years of pent-up fear. Mrs. Delgado, silver hair sharp as wire, stood at the front with a gavel in hand. She was small, but her presence carried the authority of someone who'd faced bullies before and never flinched. First agenda item, she announced. Allegations and charges against President Karen Miller and Security Officer Doug King. The room erupted in nervous energy. Some still clung to Karen's shadow, afraid to let go. Others leaned forward, desperate for reckoning. I stepped to the projector, laptop in hand, heart pounding like a war drum. The first image filled the screen, Karen mid-lunge toward the pool, arms flailing, tracer dye painting her like a radioactive ghost. Gasps, whispers, suppressed laughter. Click, next slide, the cash box glowing under UV light. Bills marked with tracer powder, each carrying her fingerprints. A cash register of guilt. I steadied my voice. This money was paid to Mrs. Miller in exchange for unauthorized use of my private pool. Each bill marked with ultraviolet powder used by banks to track stolen currency. Every note ties directly to her. Whispers became murmurs, murmurs became outrage. Allies shifted in their chairs, rats sniffing a sinking ship. Then Ron stepped forward. His hands shook, but his voice carried. For the past 8 months, I have documented systematic embezzlement through a fake line item, pool enhancement initiative. Total stolen, $67,432. All funds diverted into accounts controlled solely by Karen Miller. The room exploded, shouts, tears. A woman screamed, "Witch hunt," from the back. I shaded my eyes. If this were a witch hunt, we'd be looking for brooms, not bank transfers. Laughter cracked the tension, but only for a heartbeat. Then Abernathy stepped forward, briefcase in hand. "Ladies and gentlemen, every piece of evidence has been independently verified. Forensic accountants, district attorney's office, chain of custody protocols. This is not speculation, this is fact." He opened the case, revealing a stack of stamped documents, legal dynamite. And for the first time I saw it, fear flickering in Karen's eyes. The vote came swiftly. Hands shot up like flowers after rain. 17, 18, 27, even some of her former supporters abandoned her to save their own skin. Only 3 hands opposed: her sister, her neighbor, and one elderly man who had clearly fallen asleep during the presentation. The gavel fell. Karen Miller and Doug King are hereby removed from all HOA positions, effective immediately. It should have been the end, but it was. Because the deputies waiting at the back stepped forward, papers in hand. Deputy Martinez's voice carried through the stunned silence. "Additional charges have been filed: conspiracy to commit fraud, organized theft, harassment, violation of fiduciary duty." Karen's reign didn't just collapse that night, it imploded. And yet, as the room erupted in applause, I felt no triumph, only a steady, cold truth. This wasn't over, not until she faced the one enemy she couldn't bully, bribe, or silence. "Justice." Doug shoved his chair back so hard it screeched against the floor. His jaw was set, his fists clenched. He pushed down the aisle toward the projector cart like he was going to flip it, wiped the evidence away with one violent motion. 2 deputies intercepted him halfway. "Sir, hands where we can see them." Doug ignored the warning, reaching for the cart. Bad move. In one swift rhythm, they twisted his arms behind his back. The click of handcuffs rang through the hall like a church bell announcing Judgment Day. "On what charge?" Doug barked. Deputy Martinez's mouth curved in something close to amusement. "Start with disorderly conduct. We'll workshop the rest." The neighbors erupted, some in nervous laughter, some in applause, others just staring like they woken from a bad dream. But Karen didn't flinch. Her chin was high, her visor tilted just so, as if pretending this was all beneath her dignity. Then Tina stood. Tina, the single mother who lived near the edge of the development, someone most of us barely noticed beyond polite waves. She clutched a folder to her chest, her hands trembling. But her voice was fire. "She made our lives hell," Tina said, her words tumbling fast, years of silence breaking open at once. "Late fees for dues we couldn't afford, fines for violations that didn't exist, harassment that drove my neighbor to sell her house at a loss just to escape. This wasn't about community standards, this was about cruelty." Her voice cracked, tears spilling, but she didn't stop. Karen broke people, she broke families, and she smiled while she did it. The room went silent. Even the hum of the fluorescent lights seemed to hold its breath. Then the applause began, slow at first, one set of hands, then another. Then the entire room standing, clapping, stomping their feet until the floor itself seemed to shake. Karen's mask faltered for the first time. Her smile twitched, her eyes darting. The Queen's court had turned against her. The deputies didn't wait. Papers were read, charges listed, rights recited. Karen's voice cracked when she tried to argue. "This is a mistake. I am the president." But no one listened. Not anymore. As the deputies led Karen and Doug out, Joey leaned against the back wall, grinning like a kid at a fireworks show. "Finally, a community bracelet program I can support." People laughed through their tears, the kind of laughter that comes only after surviving a storm. And yet nobody left when the deputies were gone. They clustered in circles, neighbors who had once hidden behind curtains now talking openly. Some offered thanks, others apologies, some potluck invitations like we were suddenly human again. A woman who'd once reported me for grass height pressed a lemon pie into my hands. "I was wrong," she whispered. "Thank you." Even the Johnson twins, barely teenagers, dragged out a folding table and set up a sign. "Glow sticks for legal fees, $1." Beneath it, a coupon scribbled in pencil. Good for 1 cannonball with permission. For the first time in months, I laughed without bitterness. Still, I couldn't shake the weight pressing against my ribs. Because as sweet as this victory felt, I knew the war wasn't over. Karen had power, money, connections, and people like her didn't just vanish because of one vote. Later that night, Sarah and I sat by the pool. The same pool that had been turned into a neon battlefield, now glass still under the stars. She dangled her feet in the water, her hand resting over the curve of our baby. "It's quiet," she whispered. "For now." Across the street, porch lights flickered on one by one. Mrs. Delgado set out chairs for a block potluck. Abernathy showed up with brownies and muttered about paperwork while neighbors trickled over with dishes, folding chairs, and tentative smiles. Ron came too, carrying a cake iced bright green. "Justice," it read in shaky frosting, a joke but one that made people smile. Joey cannonballed into the pool, surfacing with a shout. "No tracer this time, right?" I shook my head, and for a brief shining moment it felt like peace. But my phone buzzed in my pocket. A push alert. Former HOA President Karen Miller enters plea negotiations, cooperating with State AG. Joey whistled when he saw the headline, "Neon still her color." Abernathy didn't laugh. He leaned close, voice low. "If she's cutting a deal, Rob, she's trading names. Protect yourself, protect Sarah." I looked at my wife, at the life inside her, at the neighbors now free from fear, clinking glasses beneath the stars, and I knew Abernathy was right. Because Karen's empire wasn't built alone, and if she was going down, she'd try to drag us with her. That night, long after the potluck had ended and the chairs were folded away, I walked the fence line one last time. Motion sensors blinked steady. The steel gate stood like a sentinel. But I wasn't counting threats anymore. Not really. Sarah joined me, slipping her hand into mine. "You're still scanning," she whispered. "Habit. Keep the skills, lose the fear." Her words sank into me like a prayer. Across the street, children chased fireflies. Porch lights winked like watchful stars. For the first time, I allowed myself to wonder if maybe, just maybe, peace was possible. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the last time trouble would come knocking, and if it did, I'd be ready. Not just with steel gates and tracer dies, but with proof, with neighbors, with a family strong enough to withstand anything Maple Lane tried to throw at us. Because justice isn't the roar of victory. It's the hush that follows, when peace finally has room to grow. And on Maple Lane, peace had just begun. The headline came 2 days later. Former HOA President Karen Miller agrees to cooperate with state prosecutors. It should have been good news, proof that justice was moving forward, that the walls around her empire were closing in. But the second I saw the words "cooperate with prosecutors," my stomach dropped. Because cooperation meant leverage, leverage meant names, and names meant us. Sarah caught me staring at the article over breakfast, my coffee untouched. "She's cutting a deal." I nodded. "Does that mean she walks?" "Not free," I said, "but lighter. And if she's trading names, she won't just give them the corrupt officials. She'll give them anyone who stood against her." Sarah's hand drifted instinctively to her belly. The baby kicked, as if reminding us exactly what was at stake. That afternoon, Abernathy stopped by. He didn't knock. He never knocked, just shuffled up the porch with his leather briefcase and that same grim expression he'd worn during the vote. He slid a manila folder across the table. Inside were copies of property records, shell companies, transfers, a trail that wasn't just messy, it was deliberate. "She wasn't working alone," Abernathy said, his gravel voice low. This goes higher: developers, investors, people who see Maple Lane not as homes but as leverage. Ron joined us later, his face gaunt, the recorder never leaving his pocket. He laid out maps of the neighborhood, tracing lines with a shaking finger. 14 properties bought already, he whispered. Each one through a different LLC. She depresses the value with fines, harassment, fires. Then they swoop in, buy cheap, resell to the developer. Rinse, repeat. Sarah paled. That's not an HOA scheme, that's organized crime. Ron's eyes met mine, hollow with the weight of guilt. And I kept the books, I made it possible. Silence hung heavy in the room. Even Joey, usually quick with jokes, had nothing to say. That night I couldn't sleep. I paced the fence line while sprinklers whispered over lawns that looked too perfect, too staged. The street was quiet, but I knew better. Quiet didn't mean safe. It meant coiled, waiting. At 1:13 a.m., my phone buzzed with a motion alert. The front camera showed a figure at the gate. Not Doug this time. A stranger, slim build, ball cap pulled low. He bent down, sliding something under the latch. Then he vanished into the dark. I waited until dawn to check. A small envelope sat wedged under the gate. No name, no return address. Inside, a single photo. It was of Sarah, standing at the kitchen window, hand on her belly, smiling faintly. My blood turned cold. I showed her, and her face drained of color. She didn't cry, didn't scream, she just whispered, "They're watching us, they know everything." We doubled security that night, cameras repositioned, extra drives mirrored. Abernathy insisted on notarizing every record we had, every video, every transcript. "Paper wins," he muttered, "but only if it's bulletproof." Still, fear crept into every corner of the house. Sarah flinched at shadows. I started sleeping in 2-hour shifts, half expecting the smell of gasoline at our windows. Joey tried to lighten the mood, leaning over the fence with his usual smirk. "Dude, if you add a moat, I'll bring the alligators." But even he checked his own locks twice before heading back inside. By the end of the week, Karen's plea deal made headlines again. This time with a single devastating line. Former HOA president provides evidence of financial misconduct involving multiple local officials. It was what we wanted, proof the system was finally chewing on itself. But then came the kicker. A reporter, buried in the third paragraph. Sources indicate Miller's cooperation may involve residents who resisted her programs, including allegations of entrapment. Sarah read it out loud, her voice tight. "That's us." I slammed my fist against the table, coffee sloshing. "She's trying to frame us, even from jail." Abernathy rubbed his temples. "Classic tactic, muddy the waters, make you look like vigilantes instead of victims." "So what do we do?" Sarah asked. I stared at the recorder on the table, the drives stacked like bricks of dynamite. "We make it undeniable. We don't just survive this. We bury her operation so deep no one can dig it back up." Ron lifted his head, his voice was a whisper. "Then we need federal eyes now." The plan shifted. No more waiting for local authorities to play catch-up. No more hopping. Karen's plea wouldn't drag us down. We would take it higher, directly to the FBI. But to do that, we needed bait. Hard, current evidence, not just old recordings, something fresh, something Karen's allies couldn't spin. "We make her think she's won," I said. "We offer to sell, we get her on record admitting everything, the development deal, the shell companies, the fire." Joey whistled low. "That's dangerous, man, wire up dangerous." "Less dangerous than waiting for them to make a move on us," I shot back. Sarah's hand trembled, but her eyes were steady. "If we do this, we do it smart. No heroics, no stubborn pride, just enough to end it." I squeezed her hand. Agreed. That night, as she drifted to sleep, I sat by the window again, watching the streetlights flicker. Somewhere out there, someone was parked in a van, writing down every move we made. They thought we were prey, contained, broken. But they were wronged. Because Maple Lane had woken up. And this time we weren't just fighting for one pool, one house, one family. We were fighting for all of it. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. A blocked number. a woman's voice smooth and sharp as glass. "We heard you're ready to sell, Robert. Karen has friends, real friends. Meet us Friday, no lawyers, just signatures. Then you and your wife can live your quiet little life somewhere else." She hung up before I could answer. Sarah stared at me when I told her, "It's a trap." "Of course it is," I said. "That's why it's perfect." Abernathy nearly threw his coffee when I explained. "You're insane. You can't walk into that meeting." "Not alone," I said, "with federal eyes watching." And that was how I found myself in a nondescript government office 2 days later, sliding Ron's recorder across a steel table. The agent on the other side listened in silence, face unreadable. When the last file ended, he leaned back. "This is enough to open a case. But if you want indictments to stick, we need her on record in real time. Admitting to the conspiracy, talking about the fires, the shell companies, that means a wire." Sarah's hand gripped mine under the table. I felt the tremor in her fingers, but when she spoke, her voice was steady. "If we do this, you guarantee protection, relocation if needed, and the second he's in danger, we walk." The agent nodded, agreed. Friday came too fast. The meeting was set in an empty office unit near the development site Karen had been trying to push through. The blinds were drawn, the carpet still smelled of glue. A folding table, 2 chairs, nothing else. The agents were nearby, listening, recording, but the knowledge barely slowed my heartbeat. Under my shirt, the wire felt like a live snake coiled against my chest. At exactly 7:00 p.m., the door opened. Not Karen, she was still in custody. Instead, 3 men walked in. One tall, polished suit pressed to perfection. Another with a heavy build of muscle hired to intimidate. The third carried a slim briefcase. The man in the suit smiled, all charm and poison. "Mr. Roberts, a pleasure. We represent interests aligned with Mrs. Miller. She tells us you're ready to be reasonable." I swallowed. Depends on what reasonable looks like. The briefcase opened with a click. Inside, contracts, property transfer forms, a checkbook, all the tools of erasure. "You sign, you walk. In return, you never have to worry about tax in your driveway again." His words were casual, but his eyes told me the truth. This wasn't a negotiation, it was a command. I leaned back, playing the part of a man tempted. Funny. Karen said the same thing when she offered wellness hours in my pool. Only difference is she slipped. She admitted people paid her. On camera, "You want me gone, you'll have to do better than paper." The muscle shifted, stepping closer, but the suit lifted a hand. "Let's not get uncivil. We're all businessmen here." "Businessmen don't burn down the Foster's house," I snapped. Silence, a dangerous silence. The muscle froze mid-step. The suit's smile faltered, and in that instant the wire under my shirt hummed with their guilt, every word captured, every hesitation preserved. He recovered quickly, flipping a page in the contract. "That was unfortunate, but progress requires sacrifice." My jaw clenched. "You're not building a neighborhood, you're buying graves." That was when Sarah's voice echoed in my head. No heroics, no stubborn pride. So I did what I promised. I didn't lunge across the table, didn't throw a punch. I just leaned forward, my voice calm. "I'll sign, but only if you explain, out loud, who you're really working for, why Karen was harassing families, why houses burned." The man smirked. "Because fear makes people sell, Mr. Roberts, and fear pays well. Developers want land. Karen provided it, simple as that." My pulse pounded. We had him. But then his eyes narrowed, sharp and suspicious. "Why so many questions, Mr. Roberts?" The muscle stepped closer again, looming. My hand itched toward the pen in my pocket, a habit I hadn't broken since Afghanistan. But before the moment could spiral, a sound cut through the tension. A single knock on the door, then another. Then the door swung open. Federal agents flooded in, voices commanding, weapons raised. "FBI, hands where we can see them." The suit froze, hands lifting. The muscle hesitated one heartbeat too long and was slammed against the wall. The man with the briefcase dropped it, papers scattering like leaves in a storm. I stayed in my chair, heart hammering, trying not to collapse from the adrenaline crash. The lead agent leaned down, voice low so only I could hear. "We've got enough, you did good." I exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. But as they cuffed the men, the suit turned his head, eyes locking on mine. There was no fear there, no defeat, only a smile. "You think this ends with me? You think Karen was the queen?" He chuckled, dark and quiet. "She was just the pawn. You haven't even seen the board yet." The words slithered into my bones. Because for the first time, I realized he was right. Karen had been the face, the tyrant with a visor and a clipboard, but behind her was something bigger. Developers, money, power that stretched beyond Maple Lane. The thought chilled me. Sarah and I weren't just fighting a neighborhood bully. We were fighting an empire. And we had just declared war. The neighborhood was never the same after that night. How could it be? You don't walk out of a storm like that and pretend the trees were never bent, the windows never rattled. Maple Lane had been a battlefield, and everyone knew it. Karen's arrest had been the crack in the dam. But the men in suits, the ones who sat across from me with contracts and threats, proved the flood ran deeper. Developers, shell companies, layers of corruption woven so tight it was hard to see where the HOA ended and organized crime began. But we'd pulled the thread, and the whole fabric was starting to unravel. Federal agents raided offices across the county within weeks. Bank accounts froze. Property transfers were seized. Officials who had laughed off our complaints suddenly found subpoenas on their desks. For the first time, Maple Lane's fences stood taller than its fear. Still, peace didn't come easy. Neighbors whispered about retaliation, about the smile that man in the suit gave me as he was led away. Some packed up and left, too tired to gamble their family's safety. Others stayed, clinging to hope, to the belief that this time, finally, things had changed. For Sarah and me, every day became a balancing act between vigilance and trying to live again. I still checked the cameras before bed, still walked the fence line with a flashlight. But when Sarah pressed my hand to her belly and our baby kicked, I felt something stronger than fear. I felt purpose. The day the state officially dissolved Karen's HOA board, the air in the rec center was different. Lighter, like someone had opened the windows after years of suffocation. Mrs. Delgado was voted interim chair by unanimous consent. She accepted with a tired smile and one sentence that made the room erupt. "This board serves the people, not the other way around." The cheers rolled through the hall like thunder. Abernathy clapped once hard, like a judge finalizing a verdict. Joey whooped so loud someone told him to sit down before he broke a chair. Ron, quiet, exhausted Ron, stood with tears streaking his cheeks. For the first time, his shoulders looked unburdened. And me, I just stood in the back watching, letting it sink in that maybe, just maybe, the nightmare was ending. But it wasn't until the following evening that I finally believed it. The block gathered for a potluck under strings of cheap lights. Tables sagged with dishes. Kids darted between yards, glow sticks swinging in their hands like fireflies made solid. Neighbors who had once avoided our eyes now laughed with us, shared food with us. Sarah sat in a lawn chair, laughing as Joey splashed into the pool. No tracer dye this time, just clear, clean water. "No glowing lawsuits tonight," he called, grinning. "Not unless you drink the chlorine," I shot back, and for the first time in months, laughter felt easy. Mrs. Delgado passed by with a tray of brownies, muttering something about bylaws written in pencil, not stone. Abernathy smirked and corrected her, then muttered about tax codes until Joey groaned. Ron arrived carrying another cake, this one iced neon green with the word justice scrawled across it. People clapped, laughed, hugged. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours again. As dusk settled, I slipped away for a walk. Old habits die hard. The steel gate stood tall, but it no longer felt like a fortress. The motion sensors blinked steady, like lanterns instead of alarms. And for the first time, I didn't see enemies in the shadows. Just kids with glow sticks chasing each other across the grass. Sarah found me by the fence. She slid her hand into mine, her other hand cradling the curve of our child. "You're still scanning," she whispered. "Habit." She leaned against me. "Keep the skills, lose the fear." I let her words settle, softer than any order I'd ever taken. And as we stood there, neighbors gathering around tables, laughter spilling across lawns, I realized something. Justice doesn't roar, it doesn't strut, it doesn't glow neon green beneath UV lamps. Justice whispers. It's in the hush that follows chaos, in the laughter of kids no longer afraid to ride their bikes past your house, in the peace of knowing your wife can sleep through the night without waking to the sound of phantom engines. That night, Sarah and I dangled our feet in the pool, the water cool against our skin. She leaned against me, exhaustion and peace mingling on her face. The baby kicked once, twice, like punctuation. "Promise me," she whispered, "no more wars, unless someone truly needs saving." I looked at the maples swaying in the breeze, at the porch lights glowing like watchful stars. "I promise." Because Maple Lane wasn't just a street anymore. It was a reminder that even when corruption tries to choke the roots, even when bullies dress themselves as presidents and developers, a neighborhood can fight back. And sometimes the loudest victory isn't the war itself. It's the quiet that finally comes after. You've heard this confession, now wait until you hear the next one.